Alright, so a couple of days ago I did an in-depth video about the Leatherman Signal, kind of talking about the different tools you can pair it, how you can carry it, modifications, and so on. I wanted to go ahead and do the same thing with the Leatherman Skeletal, and I think I have enough things on hand to make this interesting, maybe informative if you haven't already seen it, and if you have, I hope you just are going to enjoy this and come along for the ride. Let's get started. All right, so of course this is the Leatherman Skeletal Cx. It's been shown many times. People have talked about it a lot. It's not something that is unknown. And the nice thing is that it's not overly built with a lot of functions. That does not make it mean that it is not incredibly useful. Of course, it has a 154 cm blade in this variation, and you have a bit driver at the end of this, as well as bit storage on the outside. And on the inside, you have a pair of pliers. Now, you would think, okay, that's not a lot of functions. But what I've hoped to show in this is just how many ways you can adapt this tool to work for you, and why it may be possibly the best everyday carry multi-tool, because it doesn't do too much and take up too much space. It's not super heavy. It's not, overly cumbersome. It's comfortable to use, and it makes sense as a dedicated utility knife in your kit. And it pairs incredibly well with larger knives if you're the kind of person like me to carry something like this massive 8015, then yeah, you're going to enjoy having something a little bit smaller when you want to do some fine tasks. So let's see, is there anything else we would need to talk about with the original? Now this is an unmodified, full, brand new Leatherman Skeletal Cx, I should say. But there are many things you can do. For one, you can modify the tool to give you more functionality. Now, there's two groups, of course. There's mods that don't impact the warranty, and there's those that will. So let's start with the ones that may be worth doing that will, in fact, impact your warranty. Now, one thing I've done with this RX is I've modified the plier head. I actually prefer these particular smaller pliers, like the ones on the Skeletal, to be more precise and more focused on being needle nose pliers versus being a wrench. And when you look at the thickness of the plier head, it's pretty obvious why. Now, if you see, I've probably shown this in the past, but I also tend to carry something like the 5-inch plier wrench, which when you pair these two together, you end up getting much better functionality. So having that narrow needle nose plier I find particularly helpful, and it makes the tips much more precise. So I can use it even as much as being a tweezer if needed. That's my personal preference. However, when you do that, I'm fairly sure that it will void the warranty. I personally would rather have something that I expect and love versus, just suffering through it. I'm not that kind of guy. And I have always loved the fine-tipped needle nose found on the Leatherman Juice. And I really wanted to make my Skeletal, which had that one-handed capability and had some modularity to it, I wanted that to have a similar plier head. So that's what I did with mine, but feel free to do what you'd like. Now, there's also a variety of other available modifications you can do that do not impact the warranty, and that is actually something I want to talk about, because the warranty is worth keeping. Okay, the warranty is worth keeping. They are no hassle warranties, and they are very, very, very good. So anything I say critically about Leatherman, it's definitely true, but the reason I still buy them is because their warranty is actually that good. Now, the best thing you could probably add to this is a hammer attachment. Now, the cool thing about this is just a drop-in. It doesn't require any modifications whatsoever, and it's just perfect. Not only that, but you get a 4mm hex driver inside the head so you get access to an inline 4mm driver. And if you do what I did, which is that you just open up one side ever so slightly, you will have an actual full hex driver. Let me just show you that in just a sec. Okay, so first off, we have the full hex, and I'm trying to remember which side I actually cut out. That's it. Now notice it does stop at the other side, and that's because the metal I've opened ever so slightly. I mean, it was barely anything at all. You could do it with a hand file. And now I have a full hex driver. Now you see how it does fall out. However, one of the cool things about this is if you close the bit itself from the Leatherman bit will actually help retain the hex bit, which is pretty damn awesome. And there you go. So there's your hex bit, and on top of that you have the 4mm driver. So you'll be able to use that for the precision bits, and that can be useful because some of these 4mm bits are unique to that size range. These electronics precision bits, they tend to only be, you know, found in that 4mm range. So now with just that one addition, you get access to all three major variants of specialized tools, right? Now, that does not mean that you should be going on and cranking them like they're some big Torx wrenches, okay? You have to be reasonable about it, but for an everyday carry perspective, this is very, very good as a baseline. Okay, so another thing you can do with the Skeletal, and this is something I just showed a video of, you can actually fit a T-shank saw or file into the Leatherman Skeletal and have it basically hold and lock, and that's pretty nice. The reason we can do that is because unlike the one that is built into the Leatherman Wave, is this actually has a very serious spring retention, and you will have the ability to set the saw in such a way that this little lip will catch. So if we put it all the way in, here it lock in, now we are good to go. And as long as you're putting downward pressure, you'll be able to hold this and actually use it for sawing, whether it's using this, which is a hacksaw, or using the diamond file, which has the same system. All right, you get it? Now you could, in fact, thicken the sides by putting something like epoxy or something like that, and it will fit better in the Skeletal. However, if you do that, these will no longer work in the Leatherman Surge. Leaving it like this will let you do both. So, just something to think about. That's a really good upgrade. Like getting access to T-shank saws, all of them in fact, because you can modify them quite quickly, is pretty damn phenomenal. Now, if you want to see how I did this, I kind of did the full raw footage of that in a separate video earlier last week. And yeah, you can go back and see how I modified these. But it's a fairly easy process. And I would imagine that if you had this tool right here, this diamond file, you could theoretically modify any T-shank by very carefully filing it down. Now, it would take you a very long time, but it could be done. All right. I did it on the Work Sharp, and that made my life much easier, and I basically got this done in like 5 or 6 minutes. Very simple modification, and you only are modifying the file and the saw, and you're not doing anything to the Skeletal. Once again, you can maintain your warranty, which is kind of a nice thing to be able to do. Now, let's talk about pairing with the Skeletal. Okay, so pairings with the Skeletal. There's two directions. Okay, so let's say this is in your pocket. It's working like a utility tool or a knife, like you would normally carry. If you go smaller, the most important function you should be trying to gain here is scissor. So for that aspect, what I would definitely suggest is something along the lines of a 74 or even 65, or a custom smaller Victorinox. I don't think you're going to get much better than that. And that's in large part because the Victorinox scissor is still the top dog. And it's probably going to be top dog for a long time until Leatherman gets its head out of its butthole. All right. The scissors that provided by even the 58 millimeter are phenomenal, and they provide the most useful everyday functionality. What do I mean by that? Well, they can trim thread, they can cut fabric, they can do hygiene related tasks. Those are really the three things. If you are a heavy, if you're doing heavy work in construction, it's not for you. You're going to need big shears and all kinds of other stuff. So the scissors are not necessarily going to be replaced. Even if you had those large tools, you might still want a small scissor that can do hygiene. So small scissors are awesome in everyday carry because they provide function that you may not get even with the much, much larger tools. So 58 millimeter, 74 millimeter Victorinox, they're just rocket ship. And maybe you get something like the pocket tool chest with the serrated scissors. Those are pretty cool, actually. Now, that's going smaller, and like I said, scissors are the most important thing. But what about bigger? Well, bigger, I'm a big fan of large folding knives. This one being the Voyager, the Spyderco Spidey Chef, which is my favorite Spyderco knife, and of course the 8015, which I showed earlier. Now these are very, very large folding knives. They are very slicey folding knives, and they are great for doing everyday tasks that involve food, which is what I use them for mostly. Yeah, and I don't care. I will absolutely make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with my 8015. Yeah. So these smaller blades, they don't really work really good for cutting things like a large apple or that kind of stuff. These large knives, they do a better job, and play to your strengths, right? So for me, I like this kind of pairing, and the other benefit you get out of a Skeletool is you have the Carabiner. And I've talked about this before, but the Carabiner lets you take it out of your pocket, leave your folding knife in there, and then hook this onto a belt loop. That's even better when you think about the fact that some shorts, for instance, are absolutely god-awful for anything when it comes to everyday carry, but most of them still have belt loops. So you can hook this onto a belt loop, and it's light enough at 5 ounces that you don't really care. And that's kind of one of the best parts about the Skeletool. It's small enough that using it on a belt loop makes some sense. When I do it with the Leatherman Signal, I found that it's just a little too long, and what ends up happening is it kind of gets pushed into me a little bit. It's just not quite as comfortable, and at 7.6 ounces, it's a little too heavy. So yeah, there's kind of the baseline for where you can go with the Skeletool. Now I've shown some modifications, some add-ons, and so on. That's not the only things you can do with the Skeletool, but they're the most important ones that are going to add massive functionality. There are serious modifications that have been done where they've taken out these spacers and put in scissors and all kinds of other stuff. I don't recommend that. I really, really, really don't. You're going to find that it's really not that much of a benefit, and you're still going to have scissors that are likely to be worse than something like these Money Clip or the 58 millimeter. If I was going to pick one of the smaller tools to go with this, it would quite easily, without question, be the Victorinox Manager, which is a 58 millimeter, has all of these complementary features to the Skeletool, along with a pen in the scale that is comfortable enough to be used in an emergency. So you get your pen, you get your scissors, you get your tweezers, which this doesn't have, and this provides all of the other functions. So there you go. That would be my recommendation. If you like this video, you want to see more of these videos, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you're watching it this long, probably should consider it anyway. You guys have a good day, and we'll talk again soon.